How are you, Africa? Welcome to Pan-Africanism Through Poetry with Moses Tofa. Today's poem is titled, The End of an Era, Mourning the Death of Africa's Sculptors of Consciousness. Africa, take me back to that glorious era, the era when you were decorated with luminary, militant, and organic intellectuals. Intellectuals who spoke and wrote eloquently against colonialism and imperialism, who spoke and wrote from the hearts, minds, and souls of Mwananchi, who were sculptors of consciousness, who ran the race of passing the baton of consciousness from generation to generation, whose intellectual handiwork was lucid, coherent, and purposeful, whose burning desire was to expose and smash all forms of colonialism and imperialism, who excavated the territory of imperialism and discovered all its hidden devices, who tore the garments of imperialism and saw its nakedness, who pierced the belly of imperialism and took out all its bowels, whose intellectual wizardry illuminated the struggle against imperialism, whose language was patriotically angry, unapologetic, and revolutionary, who refused to sing, speak, and write for the belly, who refused to blink, not even for a split second, whose eyes were fixated on the long game, who refused to look at anything except on the big picture, who refused to be sidetracked, who fought a timeless fight. Africa, where is this crop of intellectuals today? Please do not tell me that it is extinct, because I shudder to hear such depressing news. Your current crop of intellectuals has lost the lustre of founding African intellectualism. They have departed from the ancient landmarks of consciousness. They have become footnotes on the diabolical script of imperialism. They have been conscripted and confined to a lame struggle. They are entangled in peripheral battles while imperialism continues to loot Africa's treasury. Africa, your intellectuals are eloquent at calling for democracy and human rights. They do not have the sophistication to understand that while these ideals are good, imperialists are adept at using them to gain control over Africa's resources and to protect and promote imperialism in Africa. They are skillful at using outwardly appealing ideals to promote a vile agenda. That is why South Africa's acclaimed democracy is cohabitating with vile racial inequalities. That is why Zimbabwe was a democracy according to Western standards until the day that it took away the land from white farmers, admittedly through a corrupt, chaotic, and ruinous land reform program. That is why African dictators remain darlings of the West until the day they decide to exterminate the colonial economic order. That is why the era of democracy and human rights has failed to yield any fruit for the African. Instead, it has enabled imperialists to protect colonial injustices in Africa and to create new pathways of dominating and exploiting Africa. The fight for democracy in Africa will remain a mirage until the day that Africans understand this open truth, that there are always two forms of incompatible democracies that can exist in Africa: an African democracy for Africans or an African democracy for Westerners. The first is a democracy that allows Africans to own their resources and benefit from them, while the second is a democracy that forbids Africans from owning their resources. This is the form of democracy that Africa has managed to establish so far. It is a tragic form of democracy for Africa. Africa, you must always remember that your independence was granted under the diabolical condition that the guarantor of your stability is the maintenance of the colonial economic order. Africa. Your intellectuals are eloquent at calling for free trade between Africa and other nations. They do not have the sophistication to understand that there is nothing that is called free trade. Throughout history, all trade has been about power, financial, market, and military. Africa, your intellectuals are proficient at proving that your problems are exclusively internal. It is tragic that Africa is the only continent that is so amazingly eloquent at maligning itself. Africa, it is true that you are infested with multiple internal problems, but it is dishonest not to acknowledge that these problems are systemic. They have internal and external dimensions. By dwelling on the internal dimensions, your intellectuals are sanitizing and absorbing the external dimensions. They do not understand that the lifeblood of imperialism is the African mindset that Africa's problems are exclusively internal. They reinforce the narrative of the colonial anthropologists that the natives are a problem incarnate, a narrative that was used to justify colonialism and to bludgeon the narratives into civilization. Africa, your current crop of intellectuals are egocentrically purposeful. They sing, speak, and write for the belly. They are hunters of grants, points, and promotions. Their intellectual handwork is cacophonous. They are obsessed with publishing with the so-called high-impact journals. What impact? Whose impact? To what end? They demand to be cited, acknowledged, and validated by empire intellectuals. They steer clear of topics and words that are uncomfortable to the empire. Their desire is to toe the line of empire correctness. They have betrayed intellectual history. They have betrayed intellectual posterity. Africa, this is why you are going through a progressive depletion of consciousness. Historically, your young people were imbued with revolutionary consciousness. They lived a lifetime of struggle, as Comrade Edgar Tekere would put it. They fought imperialism with their bare hands. Their consciousness brought seismic change to the African society. Africa, where is this consciousness among your young people today? Please do not tell me that it is extinct. I shudder to hear such depressing news. I am confident that your current crop of intellectuals is to blame because they dropped the baton of consciousness and became subtle intellectuals of the empire. Their burning desire is to be given royal entrance into the imperial edifice. Africa, it is only Pan-Africanism that has the inbuilt alertness and shrewdness to expose and smash the devices of imperialism. Pan-Africanism is the only soldier that is capable of guarding against the ransacking of Africa's treasury by imperial forces. As long as the empire refuses to die, Pan-Africanism must refuse to die. Africa, it is tragic that you lost the radar of consciousness when you needed it most. You need consciousness today more than you needed it during the colonial era. The colonialism of the colonial era was physical and open, but the colonialism of today is concealed in attractive packages. It takes a deeper aptitude of consciousness to detect and smash it. It cannot be fought with bullets of the gun, but with bullets of the mind. An Africa that is without consciousness is fated to utter destruction. Africa, it is heart-wrenching to imagine that your future is in the hands of young people who are being taught and mentored by today's cowardly and belly-focused intellectuals. Africa, I mourn the death of your sculptors of consciousness. But I keep the faith that a new crop of such intellectuals will germinate and blossom again. Thank you, Africa. This is Moses Tofa, Pan-Africanism Through Poetry, inspiring Africa, raising consciousness. Amandla.